You ever read a history book where, you see all of these crazy big events happening, these world-changing events, and you think, wow, what must it have been like to live through that? It sucks. All right. Welcome to the Electric Luchador Podcast. I'm El Oscuro, the Electric Luchador. Uh, I'm your average American. I work 40 hours a week, work a 9 to 5. I pay taxes, do all that kind of shit. The exact kind of person that none of our politicians seem to care about. All right. Here with me is my good friend Anon. Why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself?
Yeah, hello everybody. I'm Anon, and yeah, I'd say that it's a safe bet to say that I'm an American as well, as in I reside in the United States of America, and yeah, I have lots of thoughts on lots of things. Um, it's funny because most of my ideas go around the idea of culture, um, but one wise man once said, and I don't know who it was, but they said it is um, politics is downstream from culture, and so it's kind of an interesting time right now, and that to me is uh, very it's compelling. So I'm happy to be here.
Yeah, and interesting is is definitely one way of putting it. Um, yeah. So this is as you all know, it's our first episode here. I guess the way we would define this podcast would be sort of a very bent towards the political, sort of a culture podcast. We do talk about some non-political things a little later on in the show, but for the most part, uh pretty political. I guess you could say it's sort of with a libertarian bent, but I mean all of these
It's loose,
groups,
right?
yeah, like all these groups, all these movements, there's so many subdivisions and schisms and all that nothing really means anything anymore. One person's liberal is another person's conservative, and I
Yeah,
mean, yeah, it's not really worth labeling anymore. But if I had to, for people coming in, yeah, that's how I'd put it. I guess if you want it in a nutshell, I can tell you confidently that both Canon and I are pro freedom of speech, 100%, pro pro gun control, and anti-war. That's a big one.
right.
That seems to be a big one that a lot of people are like, "Oh, you're anti-war," and it's like, "Yeah, why aren't you?"
Right. Well, it's funny the way we think about these things. To give a little background on that, and I think you meant pro 2A as opposed of pro gun control.
Right. I guess
Right.
pro sensible gun control.
Right. That there you go. There you go. That's
Yes,
the key.
pro sensible gun
Um,
control.
but it's funny, just a little background on that because um, I I don't really feel like you or I are inherently political, but I feel like w- growing up in the world that we did was one that was, it's actually was not unlike Georgia was 1984, where war was perpetual and it was just normal. It was in the
Yeah.
background, and it was really odd because the war was far away from here, and it was just the norm. And I think that it was pretty big in kind of formulating the I don't want to say we're post left or politically homeless, and I can't speak for the Luch, but um, the Luchador that would be my
Yeah.
short for. I'm sorry,
the
you just
li-
got a new
no,
nickname,
no, no.
bro.
I like it. I like
Uh,
it.
but I think that ideas discussed here will be a dialogue, and and that's what's most important is that we go into these situations, trying to respect people, trying to respect liberty, and trying to not only discuss current happenings, but also trying to learn from not only the things going on but from each other. So
Yeah. No, and it's definitely It's definitely become a problem just in discourse nowadays for less attention being paid to what's being said and more attention being paid to who's saying it.
Right. Yeah,
Because
well, and that's go ahead. I'm sorry. Go ahead.
no, I was just gonna say because there are people out there who those of you who are just listening and not watching the podcast, there are people who would see that I'm brown, and I would just be instantly more credible in their eyes for that. The kind of people who weaponize my skin color on the new pride flag and shit like that. It's and conversely, there are other people who would see that I'm brown and discount what I'm saying just because
Sure.
of that.
Right. Well, I think this is the kind of the goal is that right now we see uh, prejudice is not only allowed but encouraged if it's on kind of the right team.
Yeah.
And that's a really strange thing because, I mean, we can say that growing up in the 80s and the 90s, it was a lot of you know, we didn't want to we treated prejudice as it was, and I don't think it was perfect back then. But I think it's really strange where a kid could go to school right now and told that they're lesser or they have less value or have less of a voice than someone else based on their skin color, and that's problematic. But yeah, Luchard, I don't want to take over for you, but
No, that's totally all. That's totally all right. Like you said, it's meant to be a dialogue.
well,
So
yeah,
it just having conversation, having just the freedom for either of us to just kind of go and be like, okay, this is what's up. I think is the healthiest thing for discourse just in general.
well, and I think that what was really important to me and why I felt um that right now, especially in this time, it's a good place to be having conversations like this, and I feel privileged to be able to be on here and discuss these things with you. If it, to be part of that lexicon of ideas, and I guess that's maybe it's the libertarian ideals coming out here, but I think that what we should honor is dialogue, discussion in the marketplace of ideas, and I'm not gonna shut any idea out. There's a lot of ideas that I think that are abhorrent, but I don't think we should shut any possibilities out, because then that becomes orthodoxy, and orthodoxy is where we get problems. So
No,
anyway,
yeah, definitely. You need to know
carry
what
on.
people are saying if you wanna argue against it or just debate
Right.
it. You need to know what's going on if you're gonna talk about it. And on that subject of, just what's being said versus who's saying it, uh, Tucker Carlson actually
Yeah, right.
made a pretty big splash in that pool with the footage from the January 6th. I mean, what do we call it now?
Well, okay, so this is what's really interesting. Some background. So Tucker Carlson's been around for years. I'm sure everybody knows this. If Canon or myself could speak to myself, Canon, right now to go back years and years ago when Tucker Carlson was wearing a bow tie, and say that this dude would be making good points, I wouldn't believe him. Um, and it's such a strange world. There's a few things. So some background. We have this Q shaman character, the guy with the horns running around, and he was the one that kind of became the J6 spokesperson.
Yeah,
And
Jake Angeli, I think his name was something like that.
okay, yeah, um, and he had his megaphone, and he was arrested after the fact, currently serving a 4-year term, and then Tucker Carlson, as part of Kevin McCarthy's deal and to become speaker, that he would release these tapes to Tucker Carlson, which I'm just going to put out there. I wish they were released publicly. I understand why they didn't, because I think they want to make kind of a public spectacle of it, and
Yeah.
I get that in the utilitarian sense. However, I personally think they should release them publicly, but neither here nor there. So this is what's really interesting, and I to get into it just a bit here, because this is when the entire world was going to see 11 states. I think it was 11 not certify the votes for the 2020 election. Um, And not saying whatever, every election probably has sketchy stuff going on. We just have bigger magnifying glass on it now. There's some sort of funny business around it. If anybody thinks that that's not going on, then is there funny business maybe in 2016 that Trump could have stolen things? Sure, I'm not above that, and I think again, if we look at the elections in every other country, that the United States has kind of thrown in some weight, whether financial or by authority. Then if we ask ourselves, and we're pragmatic about it, can it happen here? Most certainly. So that's aside from the case, but the entire world was about to see these states, refuse to certify, and that would have been a big statement. So on the whole J6 stuff, what was really interesting was that we have all these protesters come up, quote unquote, storm the Capitol, which
they stormed the entrance, but once they were inside, they kind of chilled out.
Every other entrance was opened up for them, and there's videos with the security saying like, "I don't agree with you, but I respect your right to be here," whatever that means. Now that's actually in the released videos.
Yeah.
It was the most kind insurrection I've ever seen. So that's besides the point. So that happened.
That's and that first world insurrection.
They certified the election at like 2 a.m. that night. Chuck Schumer had his speech ready. The day of infamy, worse than 9/11, worse than Pearl Harbor. Okay, this election got certified at like around 2 a.m. And here's the thing that blows my mind. And this is you'll see this perspective coming out as we talk more and more about other issues in the podcast. But I try to take an aggregate of information from all sides, and I try to take a kind of a geopolitical analysis. So. How I see that is the fact that I want to look at the actual instances, the actual occurrences, and see kind of who gained. Let me ask you this, Luch. Did the right gain anything from January 6th?
So I think it could be argued that at the very least, the right could have gained Trump looking worse for wear, especially seeing how the race for their presidential nominee has been going lately. Mm-hmm. It could be argued that that's what they gained. But that does pale, I think, in comparison to not letting those 11 states contest the Electoral College votes.
Right, and so this is the thing that kind of throws me off. So, and this is why I said, what if this was a not only planned, but infiltrated, or however you want to say it, certainly allowed to happen. Like we saw in other riots, the National Guard was standing in front of the Capitol and other buildings. Several months ago, or not several, but a few months ago, I was in D.C. and it was during certain Supreme Court decisions. Mm-hmm. And let me tell you, you could not get close to the Supreme Court. Gates were up and there were guards. So it's interesting.
Well, there is something to that in terms of like that kind of, I guess you could say, government backing of the quote unquote insurrection, because here we go. Ted Cruz was questioning some people in the Senate Judiciary Committee, taking no prisoners. I don't know if you've seen this video or not.
I don't think I have.
Okay, so he was talking to Jill Sanborn, who at the time was the executive assistant director for the National Security Branch of the FBI. And like I'm telling you, if you see this video, like, Ted Cruz was badass. I never thought I would say that, but he was going for it. He was, he was demanding answers, and I want to know where these balls were when he was running for president. But, anyways, he asked Jill Sanborn, again, executive assistant director for the National Security Branch of the FBI, if there were federal agents involved in the January 6th insurrection. He asked her the question a few different times with different wording, saying, were there any federal agents involved in inciting violence and escalating it? Were they involved, whatever? Every time she answered, I can't answer that at this time.
Right, ongoing investigations. Have you heard this stuff with this guy named Ray Epps.
Yes. What the
Yeah,
fuck?
yeah, and so it's interesting because with Ray Epps, he's involved in every part that we can track of starting this.
And
He's not
just
arrested. He's just seen as somebody. I want to say, I forget the actual verbiage they used, but he was some sort of accomplice, or I don't know if they straight up called him, a government agent. But and then
well,
he said he wasn't there, and then it's funny on the Tucker Carlson videos, we see him there storming the Capitol at the front where all the damage happened, and we see the video of the guy with the earpiece
yeah. Well, not
trying
only
to shove
that,
people into the building.
not only
It's
that, but Ray Epps disappeared from the FBI's most wanted list overnight.
Yeah, he was on there for a day and then he was gone, or whatever it
Like
was. He was
how
just gone.
how does that? I mean, we know
Yeah,
how that
so
happens, but how
and
does
then
that happen?
I hear a lot of arguments that are like, oh, the FBI is not, or FBI is not that, either they're not that immoral or this is too complex of a play. But I don't buy that, and this is why. Because if we take that geopolitical perspective that I spoke about earlier,
Yeah.
of trying to apply, who gained what,
Who gains the
the
most?
right, the establishment gains the fact that not only does nobody get to hear the certification of the electoral college, but 10 of the 11 states, I think, I mean, it could be wrong on that, but or all 11 recanted their issues with it, and now they have this thing where I think Biden said something about the new bad guys, the domestic terrorists, and if that's what a domestic terrorist looks like, then I don't think. I mean, they look pretty nice in there. So
I mean,
the reason that I'm saying that I think this was really, there was a lot more to do with it, was the fact that that the establishment gained everything, and let's say the perceived right or the MAGA right or whatever gained nothing.
mhm.
That the geopolitical read is that, well, the establishment intended this, and the worst intended this might have asserted it. And this is what's strange, is this is the thing that throws me off the most. Here's this, and I thought this initially, right, during the whole thing when it came out, because there was this Q Shama guy, and he was like, like doing this like yell inside the chambers,
Yeah.
and there was a photographer right under him, and it was a stage picture, and I was like, that's just weird.
Yeah.
But now that we see this, he has an escort of 2 Capitol police officers, and walks by like 10 Capitol
Several
SWAT
more.
guys, or 7 guys, I forget the number,
No, I said
and they're
several.
trying to find doors to get him in, and they're locked. They're locked. They're locked, and they find one that's open, and they escort him in. And to me, here's the thing: police officers, especially Capitol Police, because I was talking to some other people about this, and they were like, "Well, maybe they're ideologues as well, and they believed in the cause." And or here's my take: and this is a little bit more sinister. They had orders,
Yeah.
because police officers, what do? They follow orders, and no one's gonna risk their job
No, yeah, and I mean, if there
to be an
was
ideologue in that position. That's just, that doesn't. I don't buy that.
no, and if there was anything for the police to lose, they wouldn't have consented to the release of the tape, because Tucker Carlson even says that he got consent from Capitol Police, and he basically told them, "I'll blur whatever you guys want," and all they
Mm-hmm.
chose to blur was like the name of a room.
Mm-hmm. This is why I think this read is the correct one.
Okay.
It's because both Chuck Schumer, Senate Minority Leader, and then Mitch McConnell, Senate Minority Leader, Senate Majority and Senate Minority, excuse me, the Republican lead in the Senate, both came out basically holding hands on this, saying, Tucker
Yeah.
Carlson might as well be a J6er, and this is too dangerous to release. Like, when is the last time that Tucker Carlson, who's on every night, that they had to have like emergency Senate announcement and speech from Chuck Schumer talking about how dangerous this is and we need to pull this off the air? Like, what the hell's that?
Tucker Carlson putting an
And
end to the two-party system.
right, but that's the thing. This is where it's interesting, is that when the entire establishment is like, no, don't look, don't look, don't look, don't look. They all knew what was up.
No, yeah,
And that's
especially
what
when
makes
it's
me think
supposed to be
that,
like the two
you
sides that are
know,
against each other, and they're agreeing, saying like, "Oh yeah, this is bad." Like
so
that's kind of how you know you're doing something right. If both sides of bullshitters are like, "Oh hey,
100%. So that's exactly my read. If all of these, establishment types, and I'm gonna use you know, who was the guy, the journalist? I'm spacing his name. The guy that started the Intercept. He's not there anymore. Glenn Greenwald. Thank you.
oh,
Glenn Greenwald. He called it the deep state, and I think that's pretty accurate. Whereas there's, you know, these actors of this establishment that not only have been there forever, but there's kind of a way it goes, and that's at the expense of the American people.
no." And the thing too is that this whole Tucker Carlson splash, which like, well, first off, I want to ask a question that like, was this pretty punk rock of Tucker Carlson to be like, "Yo,
Oh,
look at this
totally.
shit."
Like if there's anything that's
Like,
anti okay, so punk rock to me, we got to define punk rock first of all.
okay,
Punk rock to me is uh a free way of expression that is skeptical of all authority.
yes, yes.
And to me, this was a very anti-authority thing for Tucker to do. And how I'm gonna say it, that was pretty punk rock of Tucker, and I can't believe that came out of my mouth.
All right, so we're coming off the top rope next with Antifa setting fires in Georgia and just kind of generally going ham. So let's see. 35 people were detained as a result. 23 were arrested, but only 22 were charged with
Mm-hmm.
domestic terrorism.
Did you see one was an attorney for the Southern Poverty Law Center?
Yeah, which I thought was weird. Like, what do they have to do with it? That
Well,
they would
Southern
even
Poverty
need
Law
someone there.
Centers, they're activist lawyers. They are.
Okay.
And so, but it's interesting that an attorney would be involved in criminal activity.
Well,
And that's the
technically he
thing
was there
too.
as an
Go ahead.
observer, but that's what they
Right.
say. And he was the one
Right.
that wasn't charged.
Gotcha.
Of the 23 arrested, he was the one that wasn't charged because he was able to make the bail. So they're like, okay.
Well, and this is what's okay, and that's I'm going to say it right now too. I'm not above making mistakes, and I didn't know that he was one of the ones that was not charged. So I readily admit that I have mistakes, and that's why, like I said, this is a good place to also. If there's more information that comes in, I'm open to it.
Yeah. I mean, that's
You know,
assuming what I'm saying is right too. So
right. But it's just it was. Did you watch the video, Luch?
yeah, yeah, and just for the people who may not be familiar with the situation, it's a construction site for a future training facility for the Atlanta PD. It's been kind of an issue for a while. People have been derisively calling it Copland or something like that.
Right.
And there have already been some protests. One of them, someone was actually killed by it. I think like a state trooper back
Hmm.
in where was it, in January? Yes, yeah,
Yeah.
January. And then sometime before that, 5 people were arrested in December. There we go. For protesting at the training site, and they had like flares and gasoline and some like explosives, I want to say. So it's
I mean,
been pretty wild.
right. And I know that the police say they're being shot at, and maybe that's true. I didn't see the video, but I saw them throwing in like improvised explosives, and
It was
mainly it looks
fireworks.
like
It wasn't
fireworks.
improvised explosives. It was fireworks that they were throwing because you,
Right.
you saw them. Like I watched the whole video, at least what was available. Um, they threw them, and you saw them like explode and like splinter off into like these bright red sparks. So
But it just
they were
seems
throwing
so like
fireworks.
it just seems so privileged. It's so funny. It
Well,
like literally it seems like a bunch of kids getting together
yeah, I was gonna say the
and
fireworks thing seems very like a teenager thing
well,
to
but
do.
but it's one of those things where you think you're making a statement when really it's I don't know.
I mean, you're making a
Some
statement, just
guy's
not the
gonna
one
get
you
laid
think you're
tonight
making.
because his activist girlfriend was like, "That was so brave," and
Right?
I don't know, dude. It's funny because like let's say is Antifa actually, if you're actually caring about, let's say, minorities, right?
Mm-hmm.
There's a lot of things you could do. Like, for example, gather around and let's pool our resources and let's open, a place that teaches trades for free for people in the inner city.
Mm-hmm.
That's productive, that's positive, that doesn't hurt anybody. And it's funny because there's ways to quote unquote protest that are not like cool guy punk rock, put a mask on and you know
Burn
go
down
after
construction
cops.
equipment.
Right.
And I
We're
mean,
gonna burn down this bulldozer.
and that's the
Like,
thing too, like going on the punk rock thing. uh, maybe I'm crazy, but wasn't that kind of a blue collar movement, and they're burning construction equipment? Like, come
well,
the
it's funny
fuck
because not only that, you know who's paying for that construction equipment? They are with their taxes.
on.
Like,
Yeah.
what a bunch of dummies! Like,
No,
come on,
and
dude. Yeah.
there was a music festival nearby, on the other side of, like, there was like a wooded area between the construction site and the music festival, and then apparently some people just splintered off from the music festival, made their way over. It was a pretty sizable group of people. Like, you can, in if you watch the
It was
video, you
like
can see them all,
150 to
like,
200. Yeah, at least
yeah,
that's what it
like
looked like.
running in there, throwing fireworks. What's funny is that at a certain point, it did kind of look like our quote unquote insurrection, where like there was smoke coming out and people were just kind of standing around and chilling.
Right, exactly.
But then, like, cops started coming. And here's the thing, too, the cops showed a surprising amount of restraint.
For sure. And that's the really thing that's the interesting thing to me now is that and I'm one that I don't think cops I think by and large a lot of the changes to the police department have been positive over the last 10 or 20 years, like with
Hmm.
body cams. And I do have an issue with potential Fourth Amendment problems with body cams, but overall with cops having to be cool, I think that does help.
Yeah.
However, I'm gonna say that right now a cop is afraid to actually maybe do something that they should be doing because they're scared that they could be scrutinized for the wrong reasons,
Yeah,
and that's
it's.
gotta be scary, dude. I wouldn't. Can you imagine being a cop right now?
Yeah, I don't want to. It's,
Right,
it's,
that it
it's
would be
already
awful.
hard enough.
It would be awful, and like not only like again, I don't.
Especially if you're a white cop.
I'm in generally. I don't like a lot of authoritarian positions, but I also want to say there's some bad cops out there. There's probably some good cops. I've had experiences with both. Um, and you know, but in the end of the day, they're people trying to get back to their families. Now, I don't think someone's like the man just because they're a cop. Sure, you could say there's always places to talk about ways we can reform certain institutions, but at the same time, getting your ski mask on and like let's go blow something up. That's usually not the right way to do it.
Right.
And I guess that comes back to the anti-violence piece.
I do want to issue a correction to what I had said earlier. They
Okay.
did have Molotovs, which is how they set the fires. But when it came to actually throwing things at police, it was just rocks and fireworks. Well, because here's the thing, too, is that supposedly after the events shown in the video ended, now, granted, I got this particular bit from CNN, so take that as you will.
Sure. Sure.
Uh, Afterwards, police went to the music festival or whatever was going on there, and started tackling people and tasing people, and
Yeah.
were like threatening to use deadly force and all that. And so like they're they I guess they interviewed people who were there at the festival just to listen to music, that they're like, yeah, like cops just came in and started attacking people.
And that's certainly a possibility. I haven't heard if that's the case, and if that's the case, it's wrong still. Um, and I'm certainly not a police apologist. However, if there's anybody I dislike more than the police, it's Antifa. But
Well, yeah,
uh,
because here's the thing too, is that like it's I'm under the impression that Antifa is very pro minority, pro like, yeah, non-white people uh getting their due, you could say.
Right, right,
That's
right,
my
right.
impression. The mayor of Atlanta is black, and he was the one talking about um like hyping up that training facility. I have a quote from him here. Mayor Andre Dickens, a Democrat too. Let's see. Atlanta has the most extensive training requirements in the Southeast. The training that was involved would include, quote, vital areas like de escalation training techniques, mental health, community oriented policing, crisis intervention training, as well as civil rights history education, end quote. Now, tell me, Kanon, have you ever heard a more deplorable example of fascism?
Right?
I mean, obviously,
I
this
haven't
place
heard
needs to
that.
get burnt
That's
down.
crazy. Yeah, dude.
But this place
Uh,
has to go. It just
it
has
just
to go.
it just has to go.
Fucking Thanos snapped that shit out of existence. Like, we can't have that. Like, de-escalation
Jeez.
training techniques, are they insane?
Monsters, bro.
Gavin Newsom versus Walgreens. Now this is a match I didn't expect to see on the card. That's
Yeah, this is an interesting one. You want to give the context and we can get some dots?
yeah. So Walgreens announced that it's going to stop selling. I don't know who the fuck names these. Okay, so it's
I can't say it either.
I think it's misoprostol.
Yeah.
Misoprostol. I don't know. So
Is it okay if we call it the abortion pill?
yes, the part one of the
Okay.
abortion pill. It's a
Right.
tag team, so it's two of them.
Right.
So part one of this abortion
Is this
pill.
the morning after pill? Is it the same thing?
No. I actually looked that up too. So
Okay.
let's see.
You can tell neither of us have babies, so
So mifeprostone is not Plan B. Plan B is something I didn't write it down. I should have written it down. Plan B is something that starts with an L. Mifeprostone, I think is what it's called. Whatever. I'm gonna keep butchering this throughout.
right. The
throughout
less
the
we
whole
save the
thing.
big words, the better.
But no,
We want to sound
no.
academic, right?
See, we can admit when we're wrong. So I can
Right.
freely admit that I don't know how to pronounce this, and I am going to continue to pronounce it wrong because I have nothing to hide. I'm okay with being corrected. My ego is not that fragile. So mifeprostone is part one of a two-part prescription only medical abortion treatment. And so Walgreens released a statement saying that they will not be selling it anymore in 20 states. And this was following a letter from several attorneys general from those states. So 20 states.
Right.
And so when that news broke out, Gavin Newsom, governor of California, took it personally and was like, California won't be doing business with Walgreens or at Walgreens, because this was a tweet, or any company that cowers to the extremists and puts women's lives at risk. We're done. That's his tweet, word for word.
Mm.
Okay.
You know what's interesting too is that didn't these states independently pass laws that said that you needed to prescribe, like, because it wasn't the issue that the way that Walgreens had it set up is that you could do telehealth without a doctor, and you're able to get this treatment, and that's why it became problematic. So Walgreens said, well, if it's going to become illegal, then we got to be careful when we're selling this. And suddenly, right now, it's a political deal, like it. Walgreens is not going to get itself in legal trouble in states where it might be illegal. Here's the thing, and can we just talk about this for a second to give the overall context?
Yeah.
I hear this talked about a lot with when the Supreme Court overturned Roe v. Wade, but even Ruth Bader Ginsburg said it was on shaky ground, and it was an interpretation of a decision, and they never codified it, never ratified it into a law, because there's an actual process to making abortion legal across all states. It's called
Mm-hmm.
an amendment to the Constitution. And nobody's arguing for that, which is odd because you think that, instead they're trying to find like a fringe decision that, apparently protects a woman, but if it has so much support, why don't they go for an amendment? Well, they won't because, people are actually pretty split on it. And I actually don't care one way or another. My issue is this. What the Supreme Court did, it said, hey, this is not a federal decision. This is a state decision. And actually that might have, like Gavin Newsom in his state, that's actually going to protect people there.
Mm-hmm.
And the federal government can't say abortions are legal. I want to say it's the 10th Amendment or 9th Amendment, one of them. I got to brush up on my amendments. But anything not stated or any power not stated by the federal government within the Constitution of the Bill of Rights is a state's right. And that's what this fell into. So it's actually me being the libertarian person that I am. It gives the state more agency to handle matters as they see fit with their own voters.
Mm-hmm.
So if someone's so upset about it, make your voice heard, either at the federal level to get an amendment, which they don't do because that's the big trick. They know that it's not supported, or go to your state level, as several people have, and let that be, let that be your voice.
Yeah.
That's actually, your voice will be more counted than it would be otherwise. And so
talk to your representatives, talk to
right. So it's really strange how like it seems like Gavin Newsom isn't governing, he's more being activist governor.
Mm-hmm.
Like literally picking a fight that has nothing to do with his state. And it's odd.
Well, there is a lawsuit for banning mifepristone countrywide.
What's the context of the lawsuit? Do you know?
So it's on the grounds that its FDA approval was like at least 20 years ago. Well, there's also a matter of listen to this. So the FDA has linked mifepristone to at least where did I get this? I got this off of lifenews.com. So if anyone can like verify that, so take it with a grain
It
of salt.
does sound like a hippy dippy website.
But
it sells, granola and whatnot, and anyway.
But the FDA has linked mifepristone to at least 28 deaths and 4,000 serious complications between 2000 and 2018. And Obama apparently had the FDA, I was going to say the FBI, the FDA stop requiring that non-fatal complications be reported. Now, here's an interesting thing. I actually had to dig. I had to dig pretty hard to find a list of the 20 states where Walgreens was no longer going to peddle its wares.
Okay.
Which I do want to preface this by reading Walgreens' statement in response to Gavin Newsom's open challenge. We intend to be a certified pharmacy and will distribute mifepristone only in those jurisdictions where it is legal and operationally feasible. End quote. Okay, here's the list of states: Alabama, Alaska, Arkansas, Florida, Georgia, Indiana, Iowa, Kentucky, Louisiana, Mississippi, Missouri, Montana, North Dakota, Ohio, Oklahoma, South Carolina, South Dakota, good old Texas, Utah, and West Virginia.
Well, there it is. But I think their initial statement was a good statement.
Yeah. No, yeah.
It was like, we won't sell it where it's illegal and we will where it is. That's it.
And honestly, it does seem really performative for Newsom to be like, well, fuck you then, Walgreens. But I think it's a good example to set for him to be like, we're going to weigh, if we're going to weigh money coming into California, business coming into California through Walgreens versus, the ethical argument, for him to side on the side of ethics versus money.
Well,
That you could argue that that's a good example to set.
right, but my issue is this too. If you decide for your ideological reasons that you don't want Walgreens in your state, how many is that going to be a burden on a lot of people who need medicine in terms of location too?
Yeah.
And it seemed like that didn't even come into play. Like I think of pharmacies, uh, when I think of pharmacies around immediately, we have Walgreens and CVS, and that's like it. And so I think it's certainly problematic, and it's something that maybe they shooting first and asking the questions later. Um, yeah, dude, that's a
Yeah. No, definitely. And the thing is too is that CVS and Rite Aid haven't issued any statements. Like people were asking them, like, "Oh, you're gonna do the same thing," and they haven't said anything.
Mhm.
So if they follow suit and follow Walgreens' example, is Gavin Newsom also gonna say like, "Okay, no more Rite Aid and no more CVS in California," and then where does that put people?
Right. It's like, well, we don't like what they're doing in these other states, so no more pharmacies in California. Everybody's like, what? Until they realize, like, wait a second, how are we gonna get our medicine?
Which, I mean, honestly though, um, that being said, there are a lot of pretty good like online alternatives, pharmacy alternatives
I mean,
that
that's a good point. Yeah, you're right.
will send that they'll just send the medicine directly to you, and and all that kind of stuff. But it is a really an extremely big inconvenience and upheaval of just the current, I guess, pharmaceutical system that we have here, to
Sure.
be like, okay, Walgreens, you're out. All right, here we are moving on to the fun part of the Electric Luchador podcast, the culture part, the media part. What's on TV, what are we reading, what are we playing, all sorts of shit. Um,
All good stuff. I
there's
mean, to be honest, the politics is fun, but or I guess the politics are fun, grammar. But this is probably my favorite part.
although there's gonna be a little bit of bleed over as we
Well, I mean,
talk
it's all
about like,
culture, but media and a little bit of escapism, right? In this
well,
wild world we live in.
it's, I think, specifically with the first couple of things that I had in mind. So, the first being Chris Rock's stand-up special. Did you catch that?
I did, and I thought it was it's funny because it seems the comedians are usually ahead of the game in terms of where a lot of culture is going. So let's take this back a few years ago when we had the Patriot Act, we had the religious right, we had the war on terror, we had lots of Dick Cheney's and Donald Rumsfelds running around. Um, but we also had the Onion, right?
Mm.
And the Onion was sharp in their satire, and it was relevant and funny. But it was because the left at that time was um the party of discourse, right?
Yeah.
And that's how you can make jokes. Now you have the opposite. Everything on the left is so, I guess, quote unquote, principled, however they want to take that. But jokes are just not allowed.
Mm-hmm.
Someone's always going to be a victim, and I think that's what the vibe I got from Chris Rock's stand up was that he said all this stuff goes on to me, and I'm not a victim.
No, yeah,
Uh,
it's a lot of critics were calling it sort of like a war on wokeness and that kind of thing, which,
well,
to be
right,
fair, was really only like the first like segment, the first maybe half hour.
right. Did
And
you watch the whole thing?
yeah, I did. And
What did you think of it?
if well, as far as the whole quote unquote war on wokeness that a lot of people are kind of making it out to be, Bill Maher did a much better job in his most recent special, Adulting.
Mm.
So that's one of those things where if you want to see more of a quote unquote war on wokeness, Bill Maher's adulting was great for that. It's I just thought that it's I feel like Chris Rock's special was less of a comedy show and more of him just kind of venting that he's like, what is this shit? Like, oh, uh, why couldn't she just turn around and tell Biden to back off? Like, oh, he came up and he slapped me, but of course it hurt. Like, what's wrong with you people? But it hurts worse than what his wife was doing to him. And just so much pent up rage that if you look at him after, I thought this was very strange, when you look at him at the end of the special and everyone's cheering and he's kind of standing there with his arms up, he's looking very emotional and not in a good way. Like he looks like that might have been a therapy session for him.
Sure. I mean, he's been quiet about all the stuff that's gone on, especially the Will Smith stuff. Yeah, it's an interesting take.
Yeah, like,
well, so if you could sum it up, what do you think is? I don't want to say stand-up comedy special has to have a theme, but what did you feel about it?
Yeah, it wouldn't be hard to kind of nail a theme on it, but it kind of seemed like he wanted to, the overall message was telling people just pick yourselves up, and not the whole, oh, pull yourself up by your bootstraps and do that kind of thing. No, like, emotionally, like, pick yourselves up. We all know that we're stronger than this.
Well, and that's the thing. I think that it's the compulsive behavior to be a victim is what's really problematic with a lot of probably my generation and generation underneath. Everybody has to have their intersectionality of victimhood. I don't know, but that's kind of what I got out of it, is that, hey, you're gonna be okay. You can move forward.
Yeah, it's bad things happen to everyone, but you'll be fine.
Right.
Granted, there's gonna be those times where you're not gonna be fine, and you kind of have to take it as you go. I mean, as I lost a family member recently. That's not something you just get.
Sure.
That's not something you just get over. It just, you create a new normal, and
right.
that becomes a part of you, and that's where you become okay in that new normal.
I think the new normal is the best way to say it. I mean, anytime like that we've seen any sort of unexpected tragedy within my interpersonal circles, there's a grieving process, and at some point you just have to accept the way things are and move forward.
Yeah, you gotta stop being a bitch.
Yeah, right. So yeah, no, I hear that.
So yeah, overall though, not as funny as I was expecting, but still pretty funny. I got some good laughs out of it.
So okay, overall then, out of 10 stars, what do you give it?
Oh boy, 10 stars. Let's see. I would give it. Okay, no, here's a metric that I would better understand. I would give it half of a tag team title.
Okay.
I would give it half of a tag team title, because if you have your world championship, your top top card title, bam. So that would be like your world heavyweight championship or your universal championship, what have you. You got your mid card title, your United States champion or your intercontinental champion, and then you got like the tag titles, and that's like, okay, sure. It would get half of a tag title. That's what I'd give it.
That's a wrestling reference, right?
Yeah.
Okay. You guys might be able to tell the luchador likes his
Oh yeah.
he likes his belts. Um, okay, let me bring this one up to you. Did you hear that they're in talks of trying to find a way to legalize betting for pro wrestling?
Yeah. Oh my god. Oh, that is. I mean, it it wouldn't make sense if you had, and of course, my apologies, because these people, like especially the WWE, they put in work, they churn out, 3 shows a week. They're doing their thing.
And just for the any listeners out there, I know absolutely nothing about pro wrestling, and so if I sound like a dummy when it comes to it, that's because I am. Go ahead.
No, yeah, sure. It's so like they work hard, they put this shit out week after week, 3 shows a week.
Okay.
Now, I would find the idea of betting on pro wrestling to be ridiculous if you had competent writers. Because if you had competent writers, you would be able to recognize, okay, this is where the story's going, this is how it's structured, here's our protagonist, here's our antagonist, etc., and you'd be able to follow that to its most logical conclusion. Now, any wrestling fan can tell you that that's definitely not the case when it comes to a lot of professional wrestling. So if we're talking about the big one about, WWE and betting on, oh, is Cody Rhodes going to take the belts off of Roman Reigns this WrestleMania, etc., uh,
So
things
they
are
compared
so
it.
crazy,
Okay.
especially now that Vince McMahon uh left and then came back, and no one knows if he's like calling the shots again, etc., for a little bit. I think it'll be hard to guess who's gonna win, and then it I imagine betting would be pretty legit just for that short period of time, because Triple H hasn't been running the show long enough for us to be able to predict how he's going to make things go.
You
And
know,
with Vince coming back, and supposedly that like creative wrestling is happening behind the scenes,
well,
it's
okay,
it's tough to tell.
do you think that it's legitimate? Do you think because it's clearly not going to be authentic betting? But
Right.
then again, we don't know what gets thrown beforehand. But the way it was presented in the story that I read about it, because I saw like pro wrestling betting, I'm like, how's that going to work? But they compared it to like the Oscars. Before the Oscars are presented, people know, the Academy and a few certain people know they have to know who won, and so they said that's how it's going to be in pro wrestling, and the actors would only know like right beforehand. I don't know how it would work, and I think you have too many holes for it to be actually, you know, a legitimate form of betting. But I thought that was interesting.
Well, let's let's
um,
let's let's say let's say this. Let's say this. Um, I'm gonna go ahead and say, in contrast to my previous statements, if at any point anyone at all knows the outcome before it actually happens, betting is not legitimate.
yeah, and I certainly agree with that.
Like,
And
I mean,
I
if
think
people want to
I
do it for
mean,
fun, that's fine. But as far as like an actual organized
it would be like betting on a
infrastructure,
soap opera,
like exactly. And
right?
that's fine if it's between friends and all that shit. Like if you want to bet with your friends over who's gonna win,
No, these are like
you
fucking
know.
bookies. Or
No,
sorry,
yeah,
language.
yeah, definitely not, definitely not.
It's funny, but what's cool about pro wrestling? Because I know you'll probably
Everything.
have. Well, right. Um, I guess the only thing that I think is cool about pro wrestling is the fact that and Luch probably doesn't want to hear that side of it, but um, Bob Mould, who was the singer in a punk band called Husker Du back in the day, and he was later in another band called Sugar and did some soul stuff after that. Pretty influential in terms of punk music, and Um, he was a writer, I think, for WWF in the 90s, maybe. Uh, and I think that's rad. So good for him and good
Hell
for those
yeah.
fans. But with that, Luch, what you got? What's next?
Okay. Again, this is going to be another little bit of bleed over from the political section. We actually probably should have talked about it there. But Russell Brand killing it on Real Time with Bill Maher.
Yeah,
Did you see that?
I did.
He was a fucking madman, and I loved it.
Well, have you watched his YouTube channel?
I haven't. I haven't,
Okay.
but I really want to
He's
now
been
because he
he's
was
been
just
I feel like he's been owning it. He's almost like here's the thing that's wild. You almost don't believe it because he's too just on point.
yeah.
It's everything he's saying, you're like, this
It,
is perfect.
it's quite
Like I
literally
said,
just
as
gospel.
a social libertarian, when anybody that's calling out certain global organizations the way he is, I mean that's a little bit it's brave to me.
Yeah.
Um I mean, he's calling it the IMF. He's calling a lot of different groups that not one that people usually mess with. Um, but it was good to see him just make quick work of the dude on Bill Maher's show. However, I'm going to say this about the guy. He was a CNN executive. Wasn't that's what he was?
No, I think it was MSNBC. He was a
MSNBC.
special
Thank you.
correspondent for them, something
I'm
like
going to say this about this guy though. He was wearing a Joy Division shirt, which is cool.
that.
So I thought that was rad.
For sure, for sure. He
But
gets
you can
points for
see
that.
how vain I am. I'm like, I might get along with that guy, but MSNBC sucks. So,
Yeah.
and Russell Brand killed it.
Oh yeah. All right. Now, as far as just media and all that coming up, what have you been watching? What have you? I know you've been watching The Last of Us, and I haven't. I
Yeah.
haven't watched it yet. I'm waiting for the season to be over before I really
Well,
take that
we'll
dive.
save that one because I have a lot to say about that. But we are 2 days away from the season finale, so
Okay.
we'll get there soon.
Okay. And I
What I
guess sort of to build hype for that match when we get to it. Um, as far as I know, Kay is a big fan of the video game. Huge fan.
Yeah. Again, let's that's another episode in itself.
No,
Yeah,
I know. Just
you could say that. Yeah.
no, yeah, just to kind of let them know what's coming. I'm not. I really
Sure.
don't like that game.
Right.
And so that's what you got coming.
But I'm gonna say this. The most fun I've been had with actual TV shows. Me and some friends are going through 24, and it's hot garbage, and it's the best garbage you ever want to watch.
Nice.
If there's anything you want to see, it sometimes you just want a really dumb show just to send it, and that show sends it.
Talking about the Kiefer Sutherland show, right?
Yeah, it's so ridiculous, and it,
Each season takes place over the course of one day or something like that.
yeah. Well, I guess it's less about that too. You gotta the writers' room. They're all fucking smoking peyote and trying to figure out, the best way to get to point A from point A to point Z, and usually the wildest way is the way they choose. And so, someone who likes to, I watch a lot of things. I play a lot of things. I have opinions, strong opinions, and I hate mostly everything. And that is just a defect of my own um, opinions, I guess. But it's kind of refreshing to not have to expect the show to be good and
Yeah.
sit back and just, I don't know,
Just kind of go for it.
Yeah, it's ridiculous. So that's been fun.
Well,
Anyway, you've been watching anything else, or?
yeah, actually, on the topic of old shows, I've been watching. Although I gotta say, I've been having the complete opposite experience. I've been watching Dawson's Creek because I didn't watch that when it was on. I was a kid, and
Yeah, right.
holy crap, that show is so aggravating. It's man. I mean, I'm pretty sure I told you this when I started watching. that initially my impression was that Dawson's Creek was one of those, after school special shows. You get a moral every week. He talks to his parents about his problems, all that kind of shit.
Sure, yeah.
And this in particular, I don't have a problem with. But I started watching the show with my sister, and I was like, God, this show is fucking filthy. They showed this on TV, like, oh my God. Everything, the innuendos, the jokes, the sex jokes, so much of that show is about just sex. I was shocked.
You realize that was at that time it would have been late 90s, and that was that generation, and
yeah, I mean,
no other generation before them ever had sex.
We're talking about the decade that gave us the best of Kevin Smith. We got American Pie, we got just so many of those movies, and just, man.
So why is the show aggravating? I can't speak.
So I mean, I guess you could say that maybe the fandom isn't part of it, but the fandom definitely adds to it.
Sure.
There's this idea that that Dawson is sort of he's kind of getting in the way of all of the happiness of the characters around him, of his friends, because he's very self-centered, and he's very, Dawson's an only child. We come into the series, he's an only child, he's a filmmaker, he's an artist, he's an idealist, he has all these
really kind of reflective.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying? Like, it's weird, he's like a reflective narcissist.
And well, here's the thing, is that, like, it's in the very first episode, he's chilling with his best friend Joey. They're both 15 years old. They're sleeping in the same bed because they have sleepovers every Saturday night. Sure. And in the first episode, just right away, she brings it up that she's like, yo, like, I shouldn't be sleeping over anymore. And Dawson, just completely clueless, is like, well, why not? And she's like, bro, we're 15. Like, look at us. Our bodies are changing. There's all this kind of stuff. And he's kind of like, okay, since when did that matter? Like, aren't we still the same people? Aren't we still friends? And they kind of have this argument, and she's like, okay, you're right. And they get into bed. They go to sleep. And then they can't sleep, and Dawson's like, man, why'd you have to say something? Now I'm thinking about it. And then you get the opening credits. So that's literally the opening of the first episode. And we find out over the course of that first season that entire conversation was sort of a misguided attempt on Joey's part to get Dawson to look at her as more than just a friend. She had apparently wanted to be more than just friends for quite some time. And now she wanted to potentially risk their friendship by taking it to the next level. The thing that guys do that people seem to hate on the internet, but it's okay when she does it. And that's one of the big things that I find aggravating about the fandom, because you go on, at least the fandom on as represented on Reddit, which
are you on the Dawson's Creek Reddit?
I'm not on it, because as soon as I got on it and I read the first post was, why do people hate Dawson? He's he's this and this, he's sensitive, he's artistic, etc., etc. Throughout the series, I'm on season 5 right now. Dawson
you went into it, dude.
No, like, Dawson does some pretty amazingly selfless things for his friends over the course of the series. Like,
okay. Do you like it though?
You
got through 5 seasons.
It's fun to watch.
But at what point is it like, no more Dawson's Creek?
It's one of those things where once I got a certain, because here's the thing, they replaced the writers after season 2 or season 3. Okay. So I went into it season 1 and I was like, this wasn't that bad. This was kind of fun. This was like a neat story all put together. Went into season 2, started out pretty strong, and then it was like, okay, this is kind of falling off the edge. Season 3 was god awful. And I was like, but we get new writers. We get new writers. So that's fine. We can push through season 3. We're getting new writers. We're getting to season 4. A marked improvement, but still not amazing, and still kind of like, man. And then at that point, it's like, I'm more than halfway through. I might as well just finish it.
I mean, you're all in, right? You're pot committed.
Yeah. So it's like, okay.
I get it.
Okay. Plus, I want to see how it ends, because even then, like, as a person who enjoys writing and storytelling and all that,
sure,
you can still learn from a bad story.
Yeah, but I think that the issue you're gonna run into is the campfire rule or the campfire game, where it's like everybody's singing Kumbaya or they're telling the story, and the next person just makes it up. Or I guess the Star Wars sequels, the next person just makes up what happens, and you go forward like that. It's hard to know what the intent of characters are because your writers are changing. I guess Mass Effect had the same problem.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
You had Drew Carpa, whatever his name is, and he wrote the first one, and he had a whole idea, and then he had the premise of the second game, and then Casey Hudson, see, the guy that took over, I think at some point in the second game, and then the third game, and it didn't really quite jive. But on that note, do you mind if I ask you? Okay, so I'm gonna say Luch is a fan of video games, as am I. What have you been playing lately?
What have I been playing? Well, I've technically been balls deep in Aliens Fireteam since it came out.
Yeah, it's about as good as it gets.
Yeah, that's been
in terms of like the ideal Aliens game. Okay, I've always wanted like a perfect sequel to Alien Isolation. But playing through Aliens Fireteam Elite and going through with some friends and seeing how the missions are replayable, and I know it's still technically a budget game, but I think they nailed it.
Oh, they did. I think probably the only thing that's missing that I would like to have would be maybe to have a mode that allows for more players.
I don't know. I think that might throw off the balance.
It definitely would, but I mean, if they gave us, let's say they gave us a raid that was like Chapter 3 of Pathogen on crack.
Yeah, I can see that.
And then let us roll in with like 4 or 5, God forbid 6 people.
Well, I think to do a raid, you can try to do like 6 people. It might get, I don't know, it might get messy.
I mean, but can you imagine 6 demolishers with what is it, overstimulated?
You might break the game though.
That would be amazing. That would be amazing.
But not to get too much into it though. I think your audience can tell that we're really into the game.
Yeah.
It's a great one. I wish we had more content for it, but I still go back to it here and there.
I think we're still gonna be getting more.
Okay.
I think we're still gonna be getting more. But I'm also playing a lot of, as people at home could probably guess, WWE 2K22. Eagerly awaiting 2K23 in a couple of days.
Ooh, snap.
Actually, no, wait. I think I get it tomorrow.
Okay, on that note.
Oh, fuck yeah.
Things are coming out recently and coming out soon. Did you play the Resident Evil 4 demo?
No. I'm going to be doing that after we finish here.
Ooh.
So.
Okay. Do you want me to say my thoughts till our next podcast?
No, go ahead and tell me. Let's hear.
All right, I want you to guess.
Okay.
What do you think of that?
Okay. I'm gonna guess that it's great. I'm gonna guess that you're like it's awesome. It's really cool how they updated it, etc. But you still prefer the original. There's gonna be something that I'm going to miss. Mm-hmm. That is going to go somehow against the sensibilities and the core philosophy of the original Resident Evil 4. That you're going to be like, if it wasn't for this, it would be perfect, but because of this, I still prefer the original.
Okay, close-ish. I'm gonna say I didn't like the demo,
Okay.
which surprised me completely.
Okay.
And I want to get your thoughts. Right when I jumped in, the depth of field seemed off. You're almost like
Mm.
in a tunnel.
Mm-hmm.
And I tried to adjust the depth of field, but it seemed like it was just moving my distance from Leon closer or farther away. And I play a lot of games. I've you know beat every single Resident Evil game several times over, with the exception of 6. I only beat that monstrosity one time, and then I burned it in a fire. Um, and that probably wasn't enough. But I'm seeing the fire. I'm never playing it again. Um, with this, uh, the first Ganado that I saw, I used Leanne's entire magazine, and then I had to use a knife, and it threw me off. It didn't quite make sense, and I liked RE2. I liked RE3 was great of the remakes that you know, remake 1, it's hard to beat that, but that came out
Yeah.
like years ago. Remake 3, I okay, everybody loves RE2 remake 2, and I think it's good, but I think it's looking at B story. It was a budget game. There's less interaction between Leon and Claire in RE2 than the original PlayStation version.
Really
In Resident
less?
Evil 3, yeah, dude.
Wow.
Um,
Because I haven't played the remakes either.
okay. Um, it's still a really good game, but I
Mm-hmm.
think they could have done more. RE3, it's a different game. I liked it a lot. You have more characterization between Carlos and Jill, but people were mad that it didn't have the same structure of Raccoon City that you get in the PlayStation game.
Okay.
And that's an understandable critique, but I thought it was a fun little romp. All that said, this game is the same engine, but it feels different.
Mm-hmm.
And you might enjoy it. And maybe you're gonna go and be like, well, Kay said it sucked, and you might be like, this is not that bad. But it felt off. It felt weighty in a
Mm-hmm.
way the original didn't. It felt the shooting was really hard to get down. The enemies were, I don't know. I'm gonna end up getting it anyway. I know
Yeah.
it comes out here in a few weeks, but I was a little surprised. So once you play, we can have more talks about that one.
Mm-hmm.
Another game that I've been playing lately. Have you heard of Signalis?
No.
Okay, it's a Unity game. It's an indie game by two people. I think a man and a woman in Germany. Their studio's called, I think it's called Rose Engine, and it's kind of their take on an old school tank control Resident Evil game.
Mm-hmm.
And it's sci-fi. It's really cool. It's isometric. Um, it's rad. And so I just went through that, and I beat that for the first time last week.
Other than that, I've also been rewatching Smallville.
Cool.
Smallville is my favorite TV show of all time. The two stars, Tom Welling and Michael Rosenbaum, they played Clark Kent and Lex Luthor, are currently doing a rewatch podcast, which basically I've been rewatching the show and just keeping up with the podcast. They watch every episode and they talk about it. They do an episode a week, and they're in like the middle of season 2 right now.
That's super rad, actually.
So yeah, no, yeah, I've been going, watch the episode, watch the podcast. Cool, wait a week, watch another episode, and I never get tired of that show. It's
Well, that's always it's always good to have something to come back to. It's like, is anybody gonna get tired of the original Star Wars trilogy? Probably not, unless you do, and then we're no longer friends.
what man, what else? No, I think that's really it. It's Smallville's just kind of one of those things that I'm always watching. I'll
Right.
finish it and then I'll start it back up. And
Yep.
it's It's such a great show. Have you watched, like, did you watch any of it even when it was on or anything like that? Where you're like, oh, let me see what this is about?
No, I was just, to be honest,
Because like you were never really into
I'm
superheroes, right?
I don't like superheroes really almost at all.
Mm.
The closest I got to liking superhero movies were Sam Raimi's first two Spider-Man movies.
Yeah.
I thought those were really good. But outside of that, not really. I just couldn't get into the spandex and stuff.
Yeah.
Not my thing. My comic books as a kid were Dark Horse comic books. The
Okay.
Aliens comic books, really, just all the Aliens comic books. um, so if the audience couldn't tell, we're big fans of James Cameron's Aliens. So
Yeah. Oh yeah.
oh man, I'll tell you. MTV has a show. It streams on Paramount Plus. It's so. I'm gonna get close to the microphone. It's so awesome. It's so good. It's called "Are You the One?" Have
Okay.
you heard of the show?
No.
Okay. What the? Let me give you the whole spiel here. So they take 10 guys and 10 girls who are all in their early 20s. And they all complete psychological profiles. And so somewhere they put them in like a resort house and give them like a bunch of alcohol. And I'll get there. But somewhere in the house is their perfect match via their
Okay.
psychological profiles.
Okay. I've heard. Yeah,
So,
I have heard of this. Okay.
you've heard. Okay, it's awesome. Okay, but I gotta finish telling you about
Yeah.
it. So
No. Yeah.
um, they are there for 10 weeks, and every week they have what they call is the matchup ceremony, where either the guys are picking the girls or girls are picking the guys, and it'll tell them how many of them are perfect matches, but it won't tell them who it is. And
Damn.
if nobody if they get what they call a blackout, if there's no new perfect matches or they haven't made like progress, then they lose. Okay, so if they're able to figure out who everybody's perfect matches by the end of the 10 episodes, then they get like a certain amount of money. Let's say it's $1 million. However, if they get a blackout, they either depending on the season they lose half their money every time. Another time they use $250,000 every single time. And so they're trying to figure this out, and it's so fun. So there's other variables involved, but they're in this house for 10 weeks then. And then it's funny because my wife and I will get together and we will we have the whole like conspiracy theory board with all the red yarn and all the possibilities and who sat with who, and I start getting crazy and crazy eyes and pulling out cigarettes out of nowhere. And yeah, dude, it's
That's
it's
so
the
funny.
most fun I've had watching shitty TV in such a long time.
That is gay.
No, I know. I had to. I'll send you.
Oh my god. I love
I'm
it.
gonna send you a picture of our conspiracy board.
I love it. Wow. Oh, you weren't joking about that. That's what...
No. Let me send you a picture.
Oh, that is amazing. That is amazing.
It's coming right now.
Okay. Can
But,
I
dude,
can I
like-
put this in the video so that people at home can see the conspiracy board?
Yeah, that's totally fine. Hold on. Oh, I can't believe I'm sending this to you.
Oh my god. You know, I used to watch shows like that when I was a kid in cuz my sister for some reason she's never been into those kind of shows, but for some reason she found one that she thought was really funny. And so I started watching it with her. It was called, oh God, what was it called? It was called For Love or Money. And, very unoriginal, but pretty much it was this dude and he had, a whole bunch of chicks, going on dates, doing all that shit. And at the end of every episode, he's like, I like these girls, the rest of you all are going home. And it would come down to it would basically come down to him settling for one woman and being like, all right, you're the one that I want to marry. And she basically had a choice to either accept like a relationship with him or to kick him to the curb and get $1 million instead. So there was the idea where he kind of had to vet to see which women were actually interested in him and which ones just wanted to, get the pick at the end and then tell him fuck off and get the $1 million. And so basically what none of them were told were that if they did pick him, they would get the $1 million anyway. And so I came in at the end of the season, and the dude, he was this big, like, hairy dude named Rob. He had picked this girl, what was her name? Erin. He had picked this girl named Erin, and she's like, bro, I'm taking the $1 million. And he was like, all right, he slunk away in shame. And we were like, holy crap, like, that's how it's going to end? But then the producers are like, well, hey, why don't you do a season where you get a whole bunch of guys and do the same thing?
Wow.
And so she did it. And so now this chick, Erin, had a whole bunch of dudes. I want to say it was like 12 dudes. And the exact same thing, either, she was gonna pick one, and either he was gonna take her or the $1 million.
I wonder if they show just social, like, experimentation and then their actual studies, not only on what they're doing in the show, but everybody watching the show.
What do you mean?
Like, it's a giant Twilight Zone episode where all the actual experiment is us watching the show, and like our actions and how we react to it. I'm being stupid. Did you get that picture?
Let me see. But yeah, but it was pretty funny because, like, we were so hooked on that show while it was on. Okay, wow, it's like a whole grid and everything.
Yep.
That you guys have set up. Okay.
Yeah, it's serious, dude. I'm telling you, this is going to become the Are You the One podcast.
All right, let's see. Yeah, I'll post this up for those of you who watch the show and want to see who they think. Apparently,
well, careful. I think it's season 7 spoilers on there.
Okay. So then season 7 spoilers for those of you who don't want to know. It looks like Will and Courtney spent a lot of time together, so.
Oh, Will and Courtney.
Nice. How about that?
I don't know.
I'm going to go ahead and just guess that Danielle is hotter than Courtney because I like the name Danielle more.
Well, you're certainly judging books by the cover. I guess by their name. That's why you have to think with your heart, Luke. Think with your heart, not with your eyes. All right? You gotta get to know somebody. That's the theme of the show, bruh.
True. Oh man. All right. Oh god, that is great. Just how much energy goes into you two just saying, like, no, like, these people here were doing this and this,
No, it's trust me, this is like my favorite thing to do with the wife creature. And
that's great.
Yeah, and whenever they release a new season, like, we're caught up right now. Every Wednesday it's a new episode. And when a new season comes, it's like giving an addict morphine. like we're just right into the veins. And so yeah.
Man. Oh, and then
what's left, but anyway, I think I've got an inkling that the season will end early, if you get my drift.
Oh, okay. Okay, we'll see. Keep us posted then.
Yeah, I certainly will. Well, that's
the garbage they put on TV.
No, are you the one's not garbage, bro?
Yeah, we eat it up. We eat it up. I mean, the TV is garbage, the food is garbage, and we're just here stuffing ourselves with it.
There you go.
But that's what it means to be an American. And with that, I will say good night. This was the Electric Luchador Podcast.